Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. When we talk about $100,000, often that's seen as a great salary. That's the goal for many people, to hit a six-figure salary. And hitting six figures, you've got to think, well, that's got to solve a lot of money problems. But then you see stats like 51% of people earning more than $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. And immediately you think, how can that be? Well, first inclination might be to say a lot of these six-figure earners, maybe they just don't know how to manage their finances. And while that may be true for some, depending on the circumstance, that likely doesn't tell the full story. First, we have to consider family size, because $100,000 for two people is going to be vastly different than, say, $100,000 for six people. And also, where you live is going to have a huge impact on how far this six-figure salary goes. And Smart Assets just did a study showing exactly what $100,000 looks like in 76 of the major cities across America. So they ran the numbers for income after taxes and then adjusted for the cost of living. Let's start out with the cities where your money goes the furthest, because I'm a good news kind of person. That award goes to Memphis, Tennessee, where $100,000 has a value of over $86,000 once you factor in the cost of living. I think that number is pretty incredible, especially for a major metro area. The remainder of the top 10 cities was really dominated by the state of Texas. Texas has 7 cities claim top 10 spots, and a huge perk going for the state is that it has no income tax. There are currently 9 states that have no income tax. Those states are Alaska, Florida, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. We lived in Washington State for a while, and I loved living in a state with no income tax. I truly feel like it gives you more of your paycheck to work with. So when we're getting set to retire, I have every intention to move back to a state with no income tax. Now, of course, a state that has no income tax doesn't make it unequivocally better than a state that does have an income tax, because these states with no income tax are going to have to make up tax revenue somewhere. Maybe that's in the form of property taxes or sales tax, perhaps another tax. So before you go and pack up that U-Haul, make sure you run some numbers if it's something you're considering. What about the states where $100,000 just doesn't really go that far, where it's cut down to less than half its worth? The 10 cities where it gets cut down the most are split between the East Coast and the West Coast and Hawaii, with New York City taking dead last, where after taxes and a cost of living adjustment, $100,000 is worth roughly $35,000. Honestly, that makes me want to cry a little. That is dreadful. I have a pro tip. If you live in one of these 10 cities, just move. Your money would go so much further elsewhere. Okay, I know that's not realistic, but oh my goodness, you're never gonna catch me living in, say, New York City. The cost of living is just so high. And that's pretty easy for me to say, being that I'm a small town country girl. That's how I grew up. I have zero desire to live there. I remember the first time we went to San Francisco, and I had the same reaction when I went to New York City. Awesome cities, but as we're walking around, I turned to my husband and I was like, it's so loud here. Does it ever get quiet? And the answer is no. For the entire week we were there, it never got quiet once. And just in case you want to see what the other cities on the list looked like, I'll put the whole list here. I mean, we know that different parts of the country cost more or cost less than other parts of the country, but oh my goodness, seeing it detailed like this was pretty darn interesting to me. What do you think? General rule of thumb, the cities that give you the greatest purchasing power with your money are in the south or towards the center of the nation. So if you're in one of these high cost of living areas and you want to stretch your paycheck further, and honestly, who doesn't want to stretch their paycheck further? Here are some ways you could do that. Consider moving. Okay, I know I said it as a joke earlier, but really this could be something worth considering. Now I know this isn't an option for everyone. Perhaps your work is location specific, then it's not on the table. But for some, the option of moving is worth considering. According to the National Association of Realtors, major metro areas like New York, Chicago, and San Francisco are experiencing population declines, while states with lower cost of living like Florida, Texas, and North Carolina are seeing their populations increase. Now, pay is often reflective of where you live, and places with a higher cost of living often have jobs that come with a higher salary. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, metro areas offer wages that are on average 1.3 times higher than non-metro areas. Often metro areas have more employment opportunities than non-metro areas, and I can personally say my pay increased 1.5 times when I went from my rural northern Michigan area to a metro area of Vancouver, Washington. Perhaps it's worth weighing the options of a higher salary in a higher cost of living area and a potentially lower salary in a lower cost of living area. If you end up with a greater percentage of your paycheck to work with, it can be easier to set aside money for investments, for your kids, for your house, for a few vacations. I can tell you my brother, who did some of his training at UCLA, fell in love with California and wanted to move to San Diego permanently. So he ran the numbers on a similar salary, but back in Michigan. And he found that he would be able to retire a full 10 years sooner at 55 versus 65 without having to adjust his lifestyle. So he headed on back to Michigan. Now, maybe moving isn't an option for you right now in your working years, but you often hear about retirees who move to a lower cost of living area to make their retirement funds last longer. Go Banking Rates ran the numbers on how long $1 million nest egg would last by state, and it ranged from just 10 years to over 24 years. Again, much of the most affordable states were in the heartland and in the South. Now, a quick note about this data, don't take these years as gospel. I looked at how they calculated the years. They didn't even assume that the money was invested. It was simply, how long would $1 million last? Most people are going to have it invested, or at least a portion of it, but I use it to demonstrate the impact of the cost of living. Consider remote work. Prior to the pandemic, only 4% of white-collar jobs were remote positions. As of 2021, 15% of these positions are remote. The great thing about remote work is that you can practically live anywhere and do your job. So that kind of circles back to being able to move to a lower cost of living area if you want to. But you do have to be careful with some jobs, because I know some employers will actually peg your pay to where you actually live. But I do think there are a lot of ways in which you can save money when it comes to remote work, because your transportation costs drop to almost nothing. In fact, a lot of families can actually go down to just a one-car family when one person works remotely. You also save on wardrobe costs. You don't have to buy a professional wardrobe. If you're working from home, you can pretty much wear whatever you want. And you can also save on food costs. If you were someone who usually ate lunch out or dinners out after work, you just simply end up eating at home. Take advantage of a pre-tax retirement account. Using the traditional version of retirement accounts like the 401k or the IRA can be a help. With the traditional version of these accounts, your contributions are made pre-tax, and that can be a help because coming up with $500 pre-tax is easier than coming up with $500 post-tax. Also, it helps to reduce your overall tax burden. For instance, if you make $100,000 and contribute 8% of your pay to your 401k throughout the year, so $8,000, you would really only see your paycheck decrease by about $7,000 or about $270 per paycheck on a bi-weekly payment schedule. Now, I know we love the Roth for the simple fact that you can make your withdrawals in retirement completely tax-free and that there's no RMDs. But if the traditional version of these accounts makes it more affordable for you to save for retirement, that's a wonderful option. You have to remember, it's not that the Roth is always the better choice or that a traditional account is always the better choice. It depends on your situation. Housing is really the biggest factor when it comes to expenses. Honestly, if you live in a high cost of living area, but your home is completely paid off, you probably don't notice that it's all that high cost. Sure, there are items that might be more expensive still, but once you have your housing out of the way, that's really more on the margins. For instance, there are currently over 600 three-bedroom homes for sale in New York, and the median price of these homes is $890,000. A 30-year mortgage with 20% down would be over $5,000 a month. A three-bedroom in Memphis, Tennessee, the metro area where a $100,000 salary goes the furthest, the typical three-bedroom house goes for about $190,000. And a 30-year mortgage with 20% down would come to over just $1,000 a month. So if you can remove a major housing expense like $5,000 from your budget, you'll find you have so much more of your paycheck to work with. Now, of course, you have to live somewhere, and there's no easy way to eliminate this payment, but perhaps you can find ways to mitigate your housing costs, like maybe you get a roommate or you do Airbnb, whatever you can to make this payment less impactful on your budget. Because if you can get to the point where you have a completely paid off home, a high cost of living area really isn't that bad. If you live in a high cost of living area and your paycheck feels super stretched, you might just have to to get back to the basics. Take a hard look at your budget. Cut out any unnecessary expenses. Ditch the expensive hobbies. Take advantage of all the free activities that metros offer. And don't be afraid to ask for discounts. Perhaps you can get better rates on your reoccurring bills or even in your everyday shopping. My husband is in the service, so you bet your bottom dollar when we go out, we always ask for a military discount because why pay more than you have to? Finally, you just may have to get yourself a side hustle. If you've cut everything you can or realistically want to from your budget and you're still running a little bit short, you have to find a way to boost your income. So let me know, do you live in a high cost of living area? Would you consider moving to a lower cost of living area? Let me know your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.